We're going to get started. Everyone, my name is Shamay. I'm one of the staff here at Department of Environmental Protection. We're very happy to have you online today, where we'll be discussing the Draft Extreme Heat Resilience Action Plan. Before we jump into the webinar, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. One being that the meeting is being recorded, and shortly after the webinar ends, within the next week or so, online we'll have the recording, transcription, and meeting slides for your review. Also, at the end of the presentation, we'll allow folks to unmute themselves, and we will call on names of those who already signed up to provide comment, which was part of the registration. So we'll go through that list towards the end. And if there happens to be any time, which there may not be, because we have a list of folks who want to provide comment, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you after we call on the folks who already signed up to provide verbal comment. If you haven't done so already, we encourage you to complete the online comments and suggestions survey. The survey allows us to have gather detailed feedback, and we encourage you to take it after the webinar. And I'll turn this over to the Chief Resilience Officer, Nick.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nick Angaro, New Jersey's Chief Resilience Officer. I'm going to quickly provide some background on how this plan came to be before we move into the details of the plan itself. This all starts with Governor Murphy's Executive Order 89, which he signed in October of 2019. The EO did a number of important things, not the least of which was establish the position of the Chief Resilience Officer. It also established an office at DEP to support the work of the Chief Resilience Officer, now known as the Office of Climate Resilience. But perhaps most important, for the first time, the governor made it clear that it was the policy of the state of New Jersey that executive branch departments and agencies take proactive and coordinated efforts to protect public health and safety, and to promote and protect the physical, economic, and social vitality and resilience of New Jersey's communities from the current and anticipated impacts of climate change. EO 89 also established the Interagency Council on Climate Resilience, known as the Interagency Council, or the IAC for short, to coordinate the efforts of the executive branch departments and agencies. When first established, the Interagency Council consisted of 17 executive branch agencies and departments. We're now up to 22. To ensure that the IAC was in a position to develop a statewide climate change resilience strategy that adequately addresses all of the impacts we face, EO 89 mandated that DEP develop a scientific report on climate change. Okay. That report was issued in June of 2020 and brought the global issue of climate change to our backyards with New Jersey-specific information. We often think about the destruction caused by storms such as Sandy and Ida when we think about climate change, but we need to think about the impacts much more broadly. The scientific report does that. EO 89 recognized that climate science is constantly evolving, and so DEP is required to update this report at least every 2 years. Since the report's release, we've updated precipitation studies, as well as an addendum on climate impacts to human health and communities. And we will also be undergoing the 5-year update of New Jersey's sea level rise projections in the coming months. Go ahead, Nat. With the scientific report in hand, the Interagency Council took to work developing the statewide climate change resilience strategy. Released in 2021, the strategy is a policy framework that includes forward-looking state policies that address some of our vulnerabilities to climate impacts and helps us strengthen resilience in New Jersey. This document has been the guiding force of New Jersey's resilience work ever since. One of the most important things the strategy did was define resilience for New Jersey. That definition displayed here is really a melding of resilience and adaptation, indicating that we're not just bouncing back, but that we're bouncing forward. There are 6 priority areas that make up the strategy displayed on the screen. Across all priority areas, there are 127 recommendations for the state as a whole. I hope you can see, Matt, we're seeing your desktop. There you go. I hope that you can see that these priority areas recognize a broad definition of resilience and type of actions necessary. Importantly, the strategy provides a high-level foundational policy framework meant to guide us in advancing our vision for what a resilient New Jersey would look like. With this framework in hand, state agencies now have a guiding direction to take concrete action to make that vision a reality, which brings us to today. The Draft Extreme Heat Resilience Action Plan, or Extreme Heat RAP, is a follow-up to the resilience strategy. The RAP lays out implementable actions that agencies are taking, will take, and should take to advance New Jersey's climate resilience. We are primarily concerned with addressing the effects of heat will have on the state's policies, programs, and decision-making consistent with the resilience strategy. Go ahead. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to New Jersey's Deputy Chief Resilience Officer, Natalie Augusto-Filione, to share more about the Extreme Heat Resilience Action Plan.
Thank you, Nick. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us here for the next 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to sort of rattle through very quick context setting and then a quick overview of the plan itself, with the intention of leaving as much time as possible, at least half an hour, to hear some of the verbal feedback that's coming in. So let's start with a very brief understanding of why this RAP is focused on extreme heat. We chose this topic for the Resilience Action Plan for two primary reasons. The first is that the resilience strategy is relatively limited in its discussion of extreme heat. And secondly, extreme heat is one of the deadliest climate impacts that New Jersey is already facing. Extreme heat is defined as a period of high heat with temperatures over 90 degrees for at least 2 or 3 days. With climate change, we are recognizing that extreme heat events are not only expected to become more frequent, but they will impact sort of larger areas of New Jersey and last for longer. And these temperature increases are felt more strongly in New Jersey. We're considered to be one of the fastest warming states in the country, in the top 5 or 6, I believe, in part because such a large part of New Jersey is urbanized. There are areas that contribute to the urban heat island effect. So here we see a history of average annual temperatures. Each bar on this graphic shows the average temperature for that individual year. The blue tone bars indicate a cooler than average year, and the red tone bars indicate a warmer than average year. Obviously, you can see a very clear pattern of significantly warming temperatures as we move into the 21st century. 15 of the 20 hottest years on records in New Jersey have all occurred since the year 2000, and the summer of 2022 ranked as the 3rd hottest on record since 1895. Editorializing a little bit here, both of the webinars that we have hosted about this draft plan have taken place on days that are very warm, 80 degrees for late April, early May. And as I said earlier, fortunately, the trend is expected to continue. So in terms of extreme heat, it's less of a question of how do we prevent this and more of a question of how do we prepare ourselves for these conditions. Now, Nick mentioned earlier our scientific report and the Human Health and Communities Addendum that accompanied it, which has really given us a greater understanding of how extreme heat directly and indirectly affects the health of New Jerseyans. Extreme heat is dangerous because under prolonged exposure, the body's innate systems for regulating temperature can become ineffective. And extreme heat acts as a threat multiplier. So if folks already have cardiovascular issues or other kinds of pre-existing conditions, they are particularly at risk. When we think about who is at risk, children, the elderly, individuals with chronic health conditions, people who work outside, these are among the folks who are most vulnerable to extreme heat and the health impacts associated with it. In the case of children under 4, they may have not yet developed the physical symptoms that allow the physical biological systems that allow them to temperature regulate. Older adults are more likely to have pre-existing conditions, or they may be taking medications that make them particularly susceptible to variations in temperature. They almost may be more isolated than the rest of the population, and or be unable to get around on their own, or to be able to afford the cost of cooling their homes. This is similar in the case of lower income populations. In the case of outdoor workers and athletes, they're spending a lot of their time outdoors. Even our young athletes are playing on surfaces that can get warmer than green surfaces like grass, for example. And people who are pregnant and breastfeeding, while this is a temporary state of being, it does make the individual more susceptible to the impacts of extreme heat because of the issues associated with their body's temperature regulation and because they're more prone to dehydration. I don't want to overlook the fact that heat waves can also have a really significant impact on our mental health and well-being. People may have limited access to cooling options. There might be facing disruptions to their sleep patterns that result in anxiety and mood swings and fatigue, difficulty concentrating. And as I said before, being indoors in order to sort of deal with the extreme hot weather outdoors may lead to lower social interactions and feelings of isolation, loneliness, sadness, etc. But extreme heat is not only a health issue. It impacts everything: the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink, the roads we drive on. So it underscores the sort of importance of taking action across every sector and working across the family estate agencies to become more resilient to extreme heat and other climate impacts. Ultimately, our goal with the Resilience Action Plan is to have an implementable guidance document. So this plan builds on New Jersey's strategy by providing us much more clear direction on sort of how. I do want to sort of reiterate that we have this online comments and suggestions form, which we really encourage that people complete. And I'm going to provide a very, very brief overview of some of the feedback that we received over the course of developing this plan. We were intentional about surveying particularly folks that are hard hit and vulnerable. And so these slides offer a very short summary of some of what we heard. And just to narrate, I guess, for folks that maybe are not looking at the screen, nearly half of the respondents, we had almost 4,000 people participate in this online survey. Indicate that they struggle to keep their homes cool during a heat wave. Folks who are working outdoors or in indoor spaces that don't have air conditioning is 12% of the survey respondent pool. Folks are sort of intervening already in that they might change their mode of transportation to get around. They might be taking, more water breaks in order to be able to sort of cope. And a recognition that heat affects costs, discomfort, even issues of environmental conservation are coming up for New Jerseyans. And we asked folks, how does your day change? How do your activities with your family change? And recognizing that people are, maybe adjusting their schedules or taking more breaks, as I mentioned before, changing activities, canceling recreational efforts, etc. I believe this is my last slide. Actually, no, it's my second to last slide on this topic, but we asked folks what their top concerns were and the cost of air conditioning and cooling, the impacts to their own and their loved ones' health, being able to find shade outdoors, having to work when it's excessively hot, and or not having it limit access to air conditioning. All of these issues came up in addition to sort of the threats that are associated with sorry, I can't tell are you guys still seeing my screen? Yes, okay. Along with a sort of series of these top 6 threats and challenges around ecosystems, air quality, the risk of drought, impacts to crop production, and potential exacerbation of wildfire conditions and our drinking water quality. And folks were looking to sort of have certain community amenities available to them in their neighborhood. They were able to identify what already exists in their communities, as well as what they would like to see more of in terms of community amenities. For example, free Wi-Fi, electricity, access and cooling centers, ways to build in recreational or community building activities into sort of learning about extreme heat-free water stations, things that are available near mass transit, etc. A crucial strategy that we recognize needs to be implemented is the activation of cooling centers that some communities have and others don't. And so there's definitely room for making these more accessible and or increasing their usage. Looking forward, we also asked folks what other kinds of topics the Interagency Council should focus on, and there was a recognition that energy infrastructure, water infrastructure, and the needs of vulnerable populations were among the things that New Jerseyans would like state agencies to focus on going forward, as well as things that people would like to learn more about. And I'll speak in a moment about New Jersey Heat Hub, which is an online sort of compendium of resources and tools and education materials that we've already sort of started to help address some of these issues that people would like to learn more about. Now I'm keep looking at my watch for folks that are noticing me looking down a lot. I'm being very intentional about staying to a certain time limit so that we can get into the conversation part for folks that would like to offer verbal feedback. I'm starting with just an overview of all of the different focus areas within this plan. And I have a series of slides, and give me just 1 second to show where I will go through them one by one. Before going there, though, I did want to call attention to Heat Hub and J, which you can navigate to by doing a quick Google search or accessing the materials on our website that you already visited in order to register for this webinar. One of the actions that is within the Extreme Heat Resilience Action Plan is the development of educational materials and awareness building activities, and Heat Hub is one such example. So let's dive right into the plan now. Priority 1, as you will recognize from the comments that Nick gave at the beginning, this is priority 1 from New Jersey's Climate Change Resilience Strategy. All of the work of this Extreme Heat Resilience Action Plan is in alignment with the strategy. So our first priority, building resilient communities, is our biggest section of the Extreme Heat RAP, and it includes 13 focus areas. And in each of these slides, I just want to call attention to the fact that the title of the focus area is at the top here. And then the individual actions within that section of the plan are all listed here individually in the bold text. Underneath that, you can find a little bit of information. Obviously, more is in the plan itself about the lead agency, the status, and then the code. If you wanted to do like a quick control find, for example, for folks that are, I would hope nobody is printing this very large document and you can just read it online. And excuse me, before I move on, there are instances where an individual focus area has multiple actions or more than can easily fit on a slide, so I'll have more than one. And I'm just going to give a tiny taste of what emergency preparedness and response actions here are included in this plan. So state and county governments are proactively addressing natural hazards through their comprehensive hazard mitigation plan. So this is work that's already happening, where there's vulnerability assessments that are being done, as well as an understanding of emergency response capacities. We recognize that in the context of extreme heat, we want to make sure that we're doing coordinated communications, building power redundancy, and doing as much intentional planning as possible in advance of extreme heat events. In the focus area on cooling centers, we've got a mix of approaches that are looking to sort of have consistency in the quality and the statewide network of places that people can go to stay cool. We want to build awareness of cooling centers, as well as other places that folks can beat the heat, even if it's not sort of an emergency shelter sort of setting, as well as recognizing that the legislature is considering a Code Red program to mimic Code Blue for extreme weather events. In the section on housing and residential cooling support strategies, there are 11 actions. This is, I think, our second largest focus area that all have activities related to energy efficient housing, opportunities, cooling technology, resource programs, ways in which we can facilitate safe indoor air temperatures that allow people to remain safe and comfortable in their own homes. With regard to worker safety and workplace health illness prevention, we've got a number of strategies that can be broadly classified in sort of two categories. The first of which is employees of state agencies themselves, and the second of which considers, actions that are specific to populations that are served by state agencies, for example, military personnel and agricultural workers. The actions in the public health focus area recognize that heat sort of worsens air quality, can impact water bodies and our shellfish, waterborne pathogens, etc. So opportunities to sort of intervene. With regard to energy infrastructure, we've got a number of actions from the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities to adapt our current infrastructure to the worsening weather and temperature extremes, as long with existing programs that help us to sort of have an understanding of how we can ensure resilient, reliable distribution of power. Our drinking water and water supply section aligns with the state's water supply plan, and it brings together sort of an better understanding of the knowledge of how extreme heat impacts our water supplies, continued monitoring and analyzing data, as well as promoting education and outreach efforts. The transportation focus area of the plan is actually the largest. It's got 13 actions in it, and it represents actions by the 4 state transportation agencies that are members of the Interagency Council, including the Department of Transportation, the Turnpike Authority, the Port Authority, and New Jersey Transit. And it's a variety of actions that are structured around the agency's commitments to ensuring the safety of their customers, the operability of their infrastructure, reliability, modifying design standards, et cetera. There's a number of activities in this section of the plan around transportation infrastructure. We have a section dedicated to helping municipalities by doing capacity building and technical assistance interventions, helping those who are seeking funding and as well as sort of fostering responsible and forward-thinking planning for community level interventions. We recognize that there's an adage among adaptation folks that work in climate change adaptation that all adaptation is local. So we want to make sure that municipalities are receiving effective and continual support in order to best protect New Jersey communities and residents from the impacts of extreme heat. There are 3 main regional planning organizations that participate in the Interagency Council, the work out of the Meadowlands, the Pinelands, and the Highlands regions of the state. And this section of the plan includes activities that focus on those areas and minimizing the impacts of extreme heat in communities within those regions of the state. The commitments under the Urban Heat Islands focus area include dedicated support to municipal officials and community-based organizations, as well as vulnerable households that are affected by the excessive heat cause under the Urban Heat Island effect. With regards to urban tree canopy and community forestry, we recognize a number of activities that primarily the DEP is fostering to ensure that municipalities are able to manage their urban canopy and forestry assets in a way that most helps them to establish, retain, expand, improve all of these programs. And lastly, within the priority 1 around building healthy and resilient communities, we have a focus area on recreation. Many folks in the survey, and just from common understanding, the summer months are when we want to be outside and recreating. So making sure that those spaces are accessible and have as many protective health features and cooling features within them. So now I'm going to pivot to the second priority area in the plan around strengthening the resilience of our ecosystems. We've got 3 focus areas here, the first being on agriculture and a number of activities that are really focused on this sector, climate smart practices and funding provided to support agriculturalists and New Jersey's growers in very context specific settings. More broadly speaking about ecosystems and habitat work, we're seeking to sort of understand how extreme heat and the temperature shifts in our natural systems are impacting our riparian areas, our wildlife, etc. And lastly, for this section, a focus on harmful algal blooms, which are caused when cyanobacteria, which sort of populate in warmer waters, affect our our drinking water supply. And so there's a number of activities just focused on HABs, what in shorthand is known as HABs, harmful algal blooms. We've got one focus area within the priority around promoting coordinated governance, and it's focused on a variety of sort of legal and legislative and advocacy type interventions that are described on the screen. We want to be able to sort of leverage existing authorities and existing rulemaking processes and, you know, existing approaches to participating in multi-state efforts. Priority 4 from the strategy is recognizing that we need to invest in quality information and increase public understanding of how climate change affects our state. So focusing in on advancing scientific understanding, we've got a number of commitments that relate to monitoring, you know, synthesizing and summarizing global data to the New Jersey context, providing assessments, continuing to do more projections work. Obviously, the list isn't exhaustive, but they're some of the most critical issues that we wanted to make sure to include in the plan. And then we have a focus area dedicated to just public facing sort of outreach, external communications efforts, including activities like those focused on very specific vulnerable populations like the elders, small businesses, et cetera, and as well as some activities in specific sort of areas of the state. And then our final priority area within the Extreme Heat Resilience Action Plan, promote climate-informed investments and innovative financing, includes examples of actions that support existing or planned funding and finance programs that state agencies run in order to modify them slightly to be able to allow folks to intervene around extreme heat issues using these funding and financing examples. And with that, we have more than half an hour, thankfully, to be able to get to the 20-some people that have said they would like to speak today. So I will turn it over to Shimei. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think I have to stop sharing screen and restart for my little timer thing to work. So Shimei, can I hand it off to you to give some instructions?
Shimei, we're not hearing you.
Just kidding.
There you go.
Okay. I think by now Ashley turned off the mute function, so I will call on names. And when your name is called, you can unmute yourself and provide your comment. Also starting with the list of those who signed up to provide verbal comment. And I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name. Last name, Adiko. Next last name, ASLSM, Sumra. Next is Anne. Hey, Patricia. Crozier.
Shimei, I noticed earlier when we were admitting some folks that some folks are on the phone. Is there a special code that folks need to do to unmute if they're on the phone? Is that automatic, Ashley? I think it might be *9. So Ashley, if there's any chance you could do a quick Google search just to confirm that it's *9 if anyone's on the phone. Shimei, go for it.
It's typically *6.
Thanks, Nick.
John Ferguson. Sharon Franz. Janine Prabuse. Kyron Gosh. Amy Goldsmith. Amy?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Amy,
All right.
we can hear you.
Okay, great. Hi, Amy Goldsmith, New Jersey State Director for Clean Water Action. I have the honor of having worked with Natalie on a climate resiliency plan where we worked on heat in 2012, so 10 years ago. I know I only have a few seconds here, so I'm just gonna hit the points and then I'll submit comments later. So one is it's important to train healthcare providers to be prepared. If we move electric vehicles further, we can reduce the ozone and the heat at the street. Having a heat registry is important. We need low-cost options for relief in people's homes. We should go from air conditioners to heat pumps. We should have alerts. We should advance the grid modernization and heat protection legislation, which is currently in the State House being voted on. We should shut down the peaker plants and go to solar and wind and battery storage. We should have do more water conservation, efficiency, and beneficial reuse as our water becomes more precious. And we should look at the multiple use and benefits of funding, whether it's from agriculture, forestry, environmental health, and use those grant dollars to do multi-purpose heat benefits. And I would just add, if I have one more moment, you spoke about, we at Clean Water Action actually have some street banners and signage that we use in cooling centers in Newark, and we would be happy to share that material if that would be useful for you. And I think one of the most important things is to figure out how low-income, vulnerable people of all ages can get access to cooling options. Cooling centers are great, but they often close at the end of the day. What do you do afterwards? And many people in public housing won't put in air conditioners because then they have to pay extra in the utilities. So there's issues around cost. And so people actually avoided getting air conditioners when we had access to free ones because they didn't want to pay the extra cost. And now it's even more costly 10 years later. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Amy. I'll just share for your awareness that because we had a really long list of people who wanted to give comments, we're going to try and run through that list, and Shimei will probably read everyone's names a second time. And then I took some notes in case we have time that I can kind of address some of these comments. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Anna Grossman. Masana Johnson. Jill Kale.
Hi. My concern is the lack of attention by municipalities to the fire risk by wildfires from the extreme heat. Looking at last summer, many of the fires were totally unexpected in municipal suburbs, and it caught everyone off guard. Particularly near me was one that was trapped about 40 homes for a considerable amount of time. My municipality seems totally clueless to this. Many of the parcels are either commercial or somehow privately owned that provide a pretty big risk of wildfire. And I don't see the state addressing anything except state lands.
Thank you, Jill.
Next up, Judith. You go ahead, Judith. Your hand's raised.
Hi, yes, I'm one of the Judiths perhaps on the list. I'm representing the New Jersey Swim Safety Alliance. We worked with someone from your team to start to identify places to swim in a heat emergency. And one of the problems is funding. We're finding more municipal pools closing because of funding. We're finding no monies locally for swim lessons, because if people seek out areas to cool off, they need to know how to swim, or we will see those drowning numbers rise. and to provide, perhaps for children in the system and in the foster care system, swim lessons or memberships to pools, but helping municipalities so they can open the doors to these facilities that are fee-based on heat emergencies and reimbursing them in some kind of a grant program. We want to see more public swimming available, but it is not always available to non-residents. So we need to get past there with some funding.
Thank you, Judith.
Gabrielle Leviton. Francis McCarron. Mary Lou Moto. Quadir Neal. And up next is Ruth Nunez.
Actually, it was.
Hi, Ruth, we can hear you now.
Hi. Actually, I was going to take myself off, but I think that there should just be more push to get housing to have better insulation. The new homes, but also to find funds to retrofit older homes or to lower the prices on insulation and stuff. I live on the 3rd floor in a condo, and I wanted to put insulation on my part of the roof. I was told I couldn't do it, that the whole community has to do it, or at least my whole building. So I think that should be some kind of a push somehow to get more owners to be able to do that at a reasonable price now before it gets worse. The heat, which we all feel because so many of our homes are not well insulated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Next, we have Bandana. Followed by Arthur. Carolyn. Timothy. Rhonda. We have 2 Michelles. Michelle Stricker. Okay, and then Michelle Tyler. Okay, Michelle, I see you have your hand raised. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Michelle Tyler. I live in Glenrock in Bergen County, and I just wonder why everybody knows that the roads are attracting the heat and creating these heat islands. We've got too many roads in New Jersey as it is, but why is the government spending $10 billion of our taxes to expand the New Jersey Turnpike when they could use that money to electrify our trains and get people off the roads? I mean, electric cars are great, but they don't really solve other issues, the roads themselves and the particulate matter that comes off the tires and stuff like that. And I just feel like New Jersey Transit is really antiquated, and like from all the rail systems I've experienced all over the world, they're probably the worst. They like, They're like the global south kind of types of trains. They're slow, they're unreliable, they're infrequent. I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer. What can somebody explain to me why so much money's going on roads and not into NJ Transit?
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Okay, and I will take hands and then read the list. So next we have Terry W. Terry, I see that your hand's raised.
Yes. Sorry for the background feed. I have 3 comments or questions. One is, what is the target?
Terry, is there anything we could do to address it? It's hard to hear you.
Okay, I can try something. Hold on.
You might have another device because I'm hearing myself echoed back.
Yeah. Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, that's better. That's much better. Go ahead.
This is Terry W. No, I had the speaker on. I'm sorry. Okay, so just 3 general questions on all the ideas that were presented. One is, I didn't notice target dates. The other thing is, how do you measure success? And who's paying? So if that could be added to the presentation, that would be great. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for working towards this. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Terry. And that's a quick one. I'll refer you to the appendix. If we have time, I'll go into more detail, but the appendix has timeframes and implementation, people, etc. But let me make sure everybody has a chance to say something, and then I can come back to the notes that I'm taking. Thanks, Terry.
Okay. And the next hand we have raised is Tisha.
Yeah, thank you. So I think a lot of your solutions are really impressive, but it's still not addressing the cause. And one of those speakers was already talking about that in terms of roads. I think we have so much we have to think about in terms of what is causing, especially if you're saying New Jersey is one of the states that's warming up the fastest. What is it about New Jersey besides roads? Is it industry? Is it lifestyle, building big houses, driving big cars? Are people taking it seriously? I just think we have to think about the root cause of the problems as well as trying to address how we deal with the problems themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Tisha. Or Tisha.
Okay, that's it of the raised hand. So I will read over the list again in case folks didn't have the chance to unmute themselves. There is another raised hand. I will take that first.
Was it Stanilas? I didn't catch the name.
Oh, Stanilas. Yep. Nope.
Oh,
they handed.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Oh, thank you so much. So I'm Stan Yarach. I have maybe more hats on me, but maybe New Jersey Electric Vehicle Association or Franklin Township, Somerset County Environmental Commission. I could say so many things, but specifically focusing on the resilience. What we noticed that 10% of population uses 40% of gasoline. And when we look into the demographic, who are these people? These tend to be the most vulnerable people. So I think that as we are trying to help those demographic, these are the poorest of the poor. That at the same time, we should be taking advantage and communicate to them the benefits of transitioning to electric as we help them with the resilience. So yeah, that's pretty much as an opportunity to tackle 2 things as we help with the resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanislav.
Okay, starting back at the top, last name Medico. Sumra. Anne. There's no repeats in names, by the way. Patricia. Patrick. John. Sharon. Janine. Chiron. Anna. Masana. Gabriel. Mary Lou. Claudia. Bandana. Author. Caroline. Timothy. Rhonda. Leaf. And Michelle Stricker. Okay, that's it of the list. If you want to take some more raised hands, 12 minutes left, or you want to provide comments, Natalie?
Do you have any more raised hands? I can't see them from, okay.
Now we have
looks
one.
like- yeah, okay. I only see it when it
Sworna?
pops up.
Sworna, you can unmute yourself.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you for a good presentation. This is Swarna Muthukrishnan, Water Quality Research Director from Clean Ocean Action. I had a couple thoughts and a couple questions. Number one is kind of relating to what an earlier, person who commented about this. Is this plan trying to meet any threshold, the climate action goals? Does it have a target that it hopes to achieve? The second thing is a lot of these, proposed measures and everything, yes, extremely critical and absolutely required, 5 years ago. But the thing is, I do not see anything in this plan. I haven't read it fully yet. So does it talk about mitigating the causative factors in the first place? Right now, we're just having these potential solutions to address just the how to protect everybody and the communities from the heat, but are there going to be any efforts towards mitigating the fundamental source in the first place? Because there's only so much energy that's in there. It could be solar, it could be any renewable. You can always shift from non-renewables to renewables. That should be the path. But at the same time, what is this plan doing to also emphasize and require reductions in consumption and conservation? And also, what is it in terms of improving efficiencies of existing systems in place? Because I believe that is extremely crucial. The other thing that I wanted to also kind of touch upon is a lot of these measures seem to align or hinge and kind of depend on a lot of interagency efforts that need to go hand in hand. I think there was one thing about Shade Tree Committee or something. So, these are there are many other ordinances, the municipal level, state level. So there's a lot of science, education, policy, all of that, not just from one agency's scope of work, but it needs the collaboration and cooperation, everybody kind of working together on this. So how are those timelines even going to be made sure that they all align and kind of move, in sync with one another?
Okay. Thank you, Swarna. Appreciate it. Shimei, do you think it's okay if I just start like doing some responses based on the notes that I've taken? And I admit I have terrible handwriting. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna mess up some of this stuff. Okay, I think I'm gonna stop sharing screen. Or let me see if there's any other. Okay, this is the last screen. I'll just leave this on the up for now. So I wrote them down in sort of the order that they came in, and although there have been some sort of repeated themes and concepts that have come up, but I will do my best to sort of address them as they come. One thing, Amy, thank you for recognizing that anything you can submit in writing, I think, is really helpful, particularly when it comes to ideas for ways that things have been done in the past that can be replicated. I will flag that because it's a plan that is directing state agencies to take action, that any examples that can be sort of filtered through the lens of how state agencies could support the various ideas. I did not know what a heat registry meant. Is that like maybe you could explain what that is? And then you also mentioned alerts, which I assume mean about heat advisories and that sort of thing. So let me just, I guess, pause there and ask for some clarification on what a heat registry and what you meant by the alerts.
Well, I think there's going to be more and more concerns about, how many women are having premature births and how many deaths are we having and what ages are they? Are they young? Are they old? Are they manifesting themselves in certain parts of the state? I think that information would be very useful in
so
making
more of like
determinations
the data, the indicators.
Right.
I follow.
Okay. How to do that and then what was your other question?
About alerts. I assume it's about like heat, advisories, the sort of weather channel type stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
You were talking about code red or, other ways in which we're communicating. And remember, a lot of, older people, they still have flip phones and, not everybody has text. Not everybody does it the same way. Some people use WhatsApp, so I think we're just going to have to be creative in reaching different age groups and technology options. And also there could be more signage in a community, that we see a lot of these, electronic signs at schools and elsewhere. We could be using systems that already exist to provide alerts or provide information to people where they often go. Like if seniors often go to a day center, like how do we get that information out? So, and we do have these huge, very colorful posters that went into all of the, cooling centers in Newark. It could be a model for using in other locations.
And that's actually
we have
one
banners
of the
that we had
the
put.
Cooling center plan was just sort of providing more support to people who operate cooling centers in terms of education materials and things like that. In the previous webinar, somebody came from the Library Association, and I think the next commenter is from the this swim safety group. But in any case, just recognizing that there's this whole sort of group of folks that can aid in communicating and reaching the specific populations that are most at risk. That's the Interagency Council is launching a variety of working groups on different topics. And one of the first ones that we just launched was around extreme heat communications, recognizing that that's, really critical in terms of people understanding that this is an issue that's, getting worse and worse. But
so
thank you
food
for that.
Centers, food centers, people are getting vaccinated. People are going to health centers. There's all kinds of
And you mentioned it in
things.
terms of training healthcare providers was one of the other comments. And I know that our Department of Health has, a direct sort of communications portal platform that they use for communicating with county boards of health, health commissions, healthcare providers, et cetera. So that's also one of the mechanisms that we're using for spreading information. The next comment I have was about wildfire risk from Jill. And Jill, I will say that when this body with the Interagency Council was trying to decide what was sort of like in and out of bounds, and this kind of applies also to the comments about clean energy and battery distribution and so on and so forth, we decided to focus primarily on the response capacities. And so while that was something that we debated, we have, generated ideas and whatnot, they didn't end up in the final plan with the recognition that there's probably value in having a more kind of condensed set of players thinking about wildfire. For example, DP has a lot of folks that think about wildfire. And I'd like to follow up. Go for it.
I don't believe that the DEP wildfire vision looks at individual changes in homeowners and developments and commercial or private properties. It's more public lands. And I really have been noticing that the realtor associations have been identifying huge numbers of our homes that are now listed as 7 out of 8 on wildfire risk. When I mentioned this to my development of 250 homes, none of them were aware that they were now listed as 7 out of 8.
Sure.
And that last summer in Marlton, a severe fire endangered 40 homes that had no idea they were at risk. And there had been a preventative burn in 2019, and yet this was severe. I do not think that municipalities are aware of helping residents know how to protect. For example, what foliage you plant within 50 feet of your home, or all kinds of ideas. If you're listed at 7 out of 8, I don't find there's any conversation about this. And yet our wildfire risk is probably one of our greatest growing challenges. And I think the DEP has to join you in addressing not just public lands and the fire that occurred in the Pinelands, but the one that was within blocks of my house last summer, surprisingly. It's time to talk to individual homeowners instead of.
And I think that there's some efforts that are underway that you may not be familiar with because they're very recent. There's a new wildlife risk. I can't remember the name of the website, but I would love, if it's possible, and I'm sure I have it in the registration, your email address to follow up with you and share with you some of the stuff that was launched just a few months ago around some of the issues. Obviously, dissemination takes time, but there's a new sort of like website compendium with a bunch of resources specifically for homeowners and for different types of
really
audiences.
Welcome that. But what I'm actually asking is for municipalities to be drawn in. When I went to my own municipality, they had no awareness of any of this. And and I think it's time that part of what you're working with, nothing could be faster in endangerment than losing an entire community to wildfire. And I don't really.
There's an action in this plan that directly addresses the sort of species planting thing. It's one of the Pinelands actions. I can't remember which section of the plan it is, whether it's an urban forestry section or whether it's in the regional planning section. But when I send you that email, I'll also find that action so you can review it, because it does speak to sort of the tolerance levels and the species planted, etc.
I really want to draw to your attention that the 55 plus people keep planting new trees directly next to their house, despite the fact that I'm showing them they're now 7 out of 8 in a wildfire risk. So I think it's time to not just talk about insulating your house, but doing appropriate things to get ready to evacuate and to stop planting things closer, and to have everybody, all these municipalities are totally clueless. This is a brand new risk to New Jersey that it's never seen before. So thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I appreciate it. I do realize that we're at time. Our team sort of discussed in advance that we were willing to stay on a little bit, especially when we saw the number of folks that had signed up to want to say something. So I'm going to recommend that we go at least to sort of 2:05, maybe even 2:10, recognizing that if folks have to drop off, that's absolutely fine. We will post the recording of this online along with the transcript and the slides. That should happen by tomorrow or Thursday, probably at the latest, in terms of the turnaround time for us to get all that content online. So I'm just going to keep going with the approach that I was using, Shemay, unless there's anything else you want to interject before people start dropping off.
Nothing else.
Okay. Judith, with the swim Association, thank you so much for your support with the Cool It. It's called Cool It New Jersey. It's sort of an application within Heat Hub that allows people to sort of think of different places, including libraries, places to swim, etc. I'm curious if you're aware of any existing funding mechanisms that are already in use for this particular population. Yeah.
There really are not. And, you know, we have real empirical data, because during COVID, when beaches and pools and all water areas were closed, people sought out relief, and we wound up having an uptick in drownings. And, you know, being surrounded by water with the ocean and with our lakes and streams, it's really important that we get out this message that people need to learn how to swim, and we need to support public pools. So when we worked with your team, they were surprised to hear that there are boundaries of residents only, residents and guests only, paid guests, because there's been a big push in government to make pools pay for themselves. We don't have a push to make football fields pay for themselves, but we have to have pools pay for themselves. So we're turning away children, and there's nothing worse than a child coming to a pool and being turned away because they don't have $5 or don't have $10 or they're not a resident. So we need to,
or there's none available unless you have proof that you live within that municipality and can't even go. I know I experienced this with my own family.
And never mind transportation. You know, it's not only financial, it's transportation. And as we eliminate pools from our communities and open lakes or supervised lakes with labor shortages and the like, what really needs to happen, and it might sound a bit frivolous compared to some of these other very big heat-related issues, is that at one time in New Jersey, knowing how to save yourself and save others and being safe in and around the water was a high priority. You couldn't get out of a college, a state college, without proving you could swim. I know, because I taught a lot of athletes how to float and how to save themselves. That's how I made my living out of college. And that went away. That went away. And then so did public pools, and then pools in schools. And before you know it, our drowning rates go sky high. And it's the leading cause of death of children under the age of 4. So even a toddler wandering away and finding a koi pond to cool off is in danger of drowning. And then there's the cost of the loss of life, and never mind the cost of continued illness due to drowning. So we have to work together on that. And the same, wearing my recreation department hats, is that shade is desperately needed. And you do mention it throughout the report. But retrofitting facilities for shade coming through either Green Acres or perhaps community development block grant funding, instead of only being very poverty related or ADA related, maybe shade, keeping up swimming pools, heat resiliency should be included in that definition of some federal funding. And that may help. But making it important again to swim and to provide, especially for our kids that are in foster system, may never have access. We have even started a campaign last year we collected 1,800 bathing suits and 900 goggles and distributed through the state, because you can't get into a pool without a bathing suit. And if a kid doesn't have a bathing suit, they can't go swim. So it's the New Jersey Swim Safety Alliance, and we're happy to help throughout this building of this information, and we'll submit some written documents as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judith. I really appreciate the comments for sure. I'm just skimming my notes once real quick. I think our next comment was from Ruth about home insulation and retrofitting older homes. I'll say noted, because I don't know much about this topic, and I do recognize that's something that we'll have to reach into our partners, Ruth, and the Interagency Council, to sort of determine whether and how. I don't believe that this is directly addressed in this plan, other than, you know, new construction, which is different than what you're describing. So thank you for the comment. For Michelle, the comments about roads, and this came up a couple times with a couple different folks, this idea that we need to sort of get to the root of the problem. This plan does not capture most of what climate action folks will consider sort of greenhouse gas emissions reduction activities. That's not within the scope of the Resilience Action Plan on extreme heat. We're really focused on sort of response strategies, adaptation, climate adaptation, emergency preparedness, sort of that bulk of activities. There is there are many additional documents that speak to reducing the degree to which New Jersey is contributing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and sort of lowering our carbon footprint as a state, as different sectors, et cetera. I'm not sure. I honestly cannot directly address the connection that you made between the work of the Turnpike Authority and New Jersey Transit. And so
well,
again, something that requires a little bit of.
Yeah, but it's,
Michelle?
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's our money, it's our taxes, and they should be spent to mitigate the climate change, the greenhouse gases, and the effects of climate change, not add to it. The Turnpike expansion is going to put more cars on the road. We should be doing everything we can to get cars off the road, and that means better public transport. And my point is, public transport is dire in New Jersey, and it doesn't reflect the amount of people that need to get to work, to school, to college, from A to B.
Okay.
It seems really counterproductive to me to do all this other stuff if we're then going to spend a stupid amount of money making things worse.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I mean, we do have a system for bringing back comments to the rest of the interagency.
I know, I go everywhere and say it.
Effort, but I want to make sure that I capture, that.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I said it here. Yeah, I go on to all of these public speaking opportunities and say the same thing, and nobody has an answer for me. It's ridiculous. But thank you.
Of course. Terry, you had questions about target dates. I answered very quickly that in the report appendix, there's essentially a series of implementation matrices for every single focus area. So for all 20 focus areas in the plan, there's sort of a landscape orientation table that tells you the implementation status, whether or not funding exists, or whether it's being done with existing funds, or if it's proposed to be for future budget asks or grants, etc. That's captured there, as well as next steps for implementation, not all of which is specifically tied to a target date. So I think it's variable over the course of the plan in terms of like what the agencies were able to submit. The other piece that you asked for was how we measure success. And I cannot read the last word. Who's paying? Okay, I did answer that. So in terms of indicators of success, etc., the plan is very, very varied in terms of the types of activities that are in here. We have not addressed that directly. We have sort of made a commitment to creating a system for monitoring and evaluating our own efforts, but we don't have, that hasn't been prescribed yet. Recognizing that in some cases we're sort of learning by doing, but I just wanted to name that that's not captured in terms of when you do get a chance to peruse the plan, but check out the funding and the timelines. Tisha or Tisha, I apologize if I'm misunderstanding that. Your comment also has to do with addressing the root causes, the foundational causes, and I sort of addressed that earlier. I'm sorry that I don't have a better response. Stanislav, if I'm understanding you correctly, I think you're saying that increasing access and affordability of electric vehicles is what your comment is. I just want to do as a reminder that we're focusing on the resilience and adaptation sort of side in these activities. Yes. There's a whole nother network of efforts that the state has underway that relate to greenhouse gas emissions reduction, carbon focused efforts, etc. And I don't know those inside and out the way I know this plan really well. I can't really directly address it, although I will say that, I want to say like 80% of our funding plan for the regional greenhouse gas inventory work is all in the transportation sector. I would be surprised if there's not, accessibility stuff around EVs there.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. No, yes, absolutely. Take your point. I was trying to make just a link that the most vulnerable people to whom you want to target your resilience are also the biggest polluters. So it's an opportunity that when you reach out to them, you also provide them education that if, you can ask them, how much do you drive? can you lower your driving? Can you replace it to electric? Which would be a different program, but it's just the way how, from the point view of resilience, that you can actually switch a bit of attention to the education to fix the root.
I will say that's not a
cause.
statistic.
Yeah.
I would love to see the source for that statistic, because I often hear the exact opposite, where the people who are, don't own vehicles, which are probably the poorest, right, are not contributing much to the climate crisis. So if you have some of that documented, I'd be curious sort of what the thinking is along those lines.
You can Google up Cultura super users, gas super users. And they have reports for every year and every state. Maybe not every state, but what they mentioned that some of those people who belong to the 10% who consume 40% of gasoline are people who are actually using, for whom the gasoline is a substantial portion of their budget.
Got it.
So they are lower income people. And obviously those people are also more likely to be vulnerable, and that's where the resilience come in.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then I do have one last comment from, I think I wrote Susanna here. I'm sorry if I got that wrong, but from Clean Ocean Action. There's not a, overall target associated with, and in fact, that's often the case with resilience and adaptation work, in the way that, greenhouse gas emissions reduction work is associated with metric tons of carbon in the atmosphere and how we reduce that. We don't have analogous work for the community of practice that does climate adaptation and resilience work. And that's also reflected here in this plan. You don't see sort of an overall sort of metric that we're trying to achieve. Across the board, there's a lot of, improvements in education, improvements in access, improvements in how we understand the issue, et cetera, but not one sort of overarching goal. And I mean, if you have ideas along that line and want to share those with us, please definitely fill out the comments form or send us an email to the email address that's on the webpage. I also wrote that you were sort of wanting to make sure that we could start more shifting towards renewables and clean energy, et cetera. And then the comment about our interagency efforts and making sure that there's sort of alignment. The Interagency Council itself has 22 state agencies and departments of the state of New Jersey. But beyond that, you sort of made the comment about the need for intentional collaboration and coordination with other bodies of government, including local, county, et cetera. This doesn't go into much detail, but in the appendix, one of the columns in that implementation matrix that I was referring to earlier includes the list of relevant stakeholders that need to be sort of included in the effort. Whatever the given action is, it'll list out the various, activities. So I'll pick on something from the Department of Human Services, which is that they have an implementation plan that collaborates with the Office of Emergency Management and a network of area offices on aging. So that's something that's intentionally sort of leveraging the fact that DHS provides support to offices on aging through their funding, through their reporting, et cetera. And then the OEM and DHS work together on, particularly the needs of the most vulnerable, which are the folks that Human Services serves. So not a direct answer to your question, or not that it's a question necessarily, but just wanting to kind of reflect that back here. And we did go over the 210 that I was aiming to end at, but I think I'll just close out with a thank you to everyone who joined us. We did have a good number of people that registered, even more so that joined the webinar, and we'll be sending out a sort of closing email for folks to have access to that. We have 2 more weeks left on the comments and suggestions form, and then our hope is to try and publish a final version of the plan as early as we can in the summer season, recognizing that we'll need a little bit of back and forth time with the other agencies and incorporating feedback and suggestions that we're getting from the public and other readers. So with that, I think I'll just ask Nick if you want to give us any closing thoughts and just say a very warm thank you on behalf of us at the Office of Climate Resilience, but more broadly, the Interagency Council on Climate Resilience. Thank you.
Exactly that. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, everybody, for participating and your comments. Please be sure to get us your comments and suggestions by May 20th using the form on the website. And with that, have a good afternoon.